Is it worth it to buy a home? What are the new housing realities for buyers and sellers? Let's raise the roof with an all-star panel. Joining us, Dolly Lenz, Vice Chairman at Prudential Douglas Elliman, Micahel Feder, CEO of home valuing website RadarLogic.com, and also out on the West Coast, Connie De Groot of ConnieDeGroot.com. Connie's a licensed broker in California. Welcome to all three of you. We've got a star-studded panel here in the world of real estate. Dolly Lenz, you've bought and sold your share of apartments throughout the years, high-end, middle-end. Give us your sense right now of whether now is really the time for anybody to consider buying a home.
I think there are two markets. There is the typical home buyer market, and there's the affluent luxury home buyer market. For the typical home buyer, if they're secure in a job, they're going to stay someplace and they're going to move and stay there 10 years, and everything is okay in their lives in that sense, I think it's okay to buy, but they have to have a long-term view of it. I think for the affluent buyer, if they think the tax rates possibly will be extended instead of cut for next year, maybe they can buy as well. So it really depends.
Michael, Liz and I got a sense from talking to Richard Fisher yesterday that the Fed was really surprised that there wasn't more movement in the housing market with all the support that they have received, at least on rates, from the Fed, with all the support they've received on credits from the Congress. What is it going to take to move the housing market right now?
Well, as you know, David, I guess I should mention that I'm a little surprised to hear that the Fed is surprised. Because for the last 6 months, what we've been saying is the problem is really the overwhelming inventory of existing homes for sale as a result of the mortgage crisis, which is only getting worse, is weighing on buyer psychology to the point where the decline in existing home sales, new home sales, was no surprise to us. I completely agree with Dolly's sentiment that if you're looking to buy a home and plan to be there for a long time, you find one you like that you can afford and you're comfortable owning, go ahead and buy it, but be comfortable that it will probably lose value for several years to come. What the Fed has to acknowledge and deal with is the fact that there are somewhere between 3 and 5 million homes for sale today that are going to cost the lenders against those homes upwards of $750 billion in losses if we don't solve that problem.
Well, Connie, again, though, if you can flip it over to the other side and say you've got this massive number of homes on the inventory side, plus extraordinarily low rates, historically among the lowest that we've ever seen. And, okay, so you have to have good credit, and as Dolly aptly points out, you got to make sure you're going to have a job for a while. I don't know how anybody can do that in such a difficult atmosphere, but does that then make it an appropriate time to buy for a certain group of people out there looking to buy a home?
Absolutely. It's a terrific time to buy. I'll tell you what some of the problem is. New regulations. It's so confusing. It is shutting the door on many buyers. It is slowing the closings because mortgage brokers are confused with all these regulations. So the banks have been overwhelmed with all this new regulation. It needs to be streamlined so that people understand, buyers, mortgage brokers, everybody's on the same page. That would help speed things up. The other thing that your other guests talked about was confidence. A home buyer, most people, unless they're an investor, they buy because they fall in love with something. It's very emotional. And with all this bad news, I mean, not only does somebody not want to buy a house, they don't want to do anything altogether. But for the people that can afford to move forward, you know, I'm seeing prices even in the west side of Los Angeles, which the cost to rent versus owning was drastically, you know, out of balance. And I've seen that has come way down. So that is a very, very good sign. Yeah. So there are some good signs also in the high end. I don't know if Dolly's experiencing the same thing. I'm seeing a lack of inventory. I'm working with some high-end buyers, and there's not much of a selection today. So that's also putting a floor on prices in that high-end market.
Dolly, you know, the New York market and the LA market for that matter, but particularly New York has always been kind of insulated from what's happening nationwide because it's kind of a unique island that we live on here. But have you seen any of the kind of panicking that you see in other real estate markets, or is New York, again, kind of separated from all that?
It is separated. I haven't seen panic, but I have seen pushback just recently.
What do you mean by that?
In other words, I have a buyer today who offered $1,960 a foot on a property, which is a lot of money a foot. The counteroffer, final counteroffer is $2,000 a foot. He will not, for 2%, step up to the plate for $2,000 a foot.
The buyer's walking away.
Walking away. He said, it's in sand, that's all I'm doing. period, end of story, next.
Have you seen that before? Or?
No, not over 2%. You know, 2% is usually a gap you can bridge in some fashion.
Negotiable, but not this case.
No, exactly. And he just said, no, I'm not going.
And what do you think
that.
is going to happen? Do you think eventually the seller is going to have to come down to his level?
Yes, and maybe below his level. You know, that's what I foresee.
Michael, what do you see that is almost that proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back?
Well, I have to comment on the $1,900 a square foot because we track, as you know, the RPX price that we publish every day is a price per square foot based on a statistical distribution of actual closings. We saw Manhattan properties, and again, this is going to be a single number, so it's an amalgamation, peak at sort of $1,400 a square foot. Clearly, there were transactions above that. There's the famous Central Park West building at $3,000 a square foot. But our numbers today are at and below $1,000 a square foot. So it doesn't surprise me at all that even for a unique trophy property, there's this standoff, even up around $2,000 a square foot, because that property is worth to the new owner what someone else will buy it for, and who knows when there'll be another.
Connie, let me bring it out of New York and LA just for a second to the Southwest. What is going on in places like Arizona that have been so killed, and Nevada in particular, when you're looking in the Las Vegas area? Is there any settling there, or is the bottom still dropping in that market?
You know, from what I hear, there is still some room to go down a little bit, but some good news as far as commercial real estate. There tends to be more people coming there to buy up some of these properties. So, and also rents people are stabilizing with their rents. But it looks like Arizona and Nevada are still suffering, and there might be some room to go. But again, in Los Angeles, we're you know, doing quite well, and that's a little confusing for buyers because they still think that they can get this terrific deal, and then they show up and they write a lower offer, and then there's another buyer there, and then there are multiples again.
Dolly,
it's crazy.
Get out your crystal ball. 5 years from now, will we look back on this time and say that was the moment to have bought a house? Or, boy, had you waited a little bit more, you could have gotten an even better deal.
Who's president?
Well, 5 years from now, I don't know. That would be a tough one.
My own opinion is that we'll look back and say that was another one of those blips. It went down, and we're back to being stable. But I don't think anybody's having the market get away from them. In other words, I don't think...
Another bubble.
Exactly. So I don't think anybody's worried that, gee, if the market is going to jump up, I'm going to lose the opportunity. I don't think that's happening anywhere. Nobody has that confidence.
Might the election change that confidence factor?
Yes.
Taxes, the election, regulation, loosening of... Look, the mortgage rates are really low, but guess what? You can't get a mortgage. So, you know, I'm not sure what the point is.
Well, we should invite you all back because while you all were talking, the Dow has moved positive.
See?
We're up about 3 points. There you go. There's confidence. 10,043. So good to have you all. Dolly Lenz, Micahel, Feder, and Connie De Groot out on the West Coast. Thanks so much.
Thanks, folks.